'Cause I'll be your friend, an ear I'll lend. I'll tell you time and time again, it's true.
Welcome back to our cosy, comfy corner of the world. I'm Amy, and if you're joining us for the first time or returning here today, you're very welcome. You don't need to have heard any previous episodes. We'll begin right from where we are. I'd like to share two moments that have stayed with me. The first happens in my counselling room. A child will be speaking, their words spilling out with excitement, and then suddenly they stop, they interrupt themselves. Sorry, I'm talking too much, aren't I? And the second moment happened a few years ago. I visited a school to give out prizes for a Wellbeing Shine sticker competition that we'd run. And in a Year 6 classroom, the teacher, commenting on my height, asked a girl at the back of the class to stand up. As she did, my heart sank a little. It became clear that she was taller than her peers, and as someone who is also tall, I hated those moments as a child when my difference felt on display. But this girl, she stood proudly, and when she was asked about her height, she beamed. She shared all the reasons that she loves it, the strengths that she sees in it. Her joy was genuine, unhesitant. It was amazing to witness. She wasn't dimming at all. And these two moments, they sit together in my mind, one child apologising for taking up space and another celebrating it. And I find myself wondering, what creates these different responses? What helps a child feel that their brightness is welcome? And what teaches them to shrink? Today, with my therapeutic friend, family therapist Denise Bevan, I'd love to explore that wondering, not with neat answers. I'm not really sure there are neat answers here, but with noticing and gentleness and care. We'll wonder together about what might be happening for children who feel too much and how we as adults can hold space for their fullness, even when the world isn't always sure what to do with their particular shade of bright. And before we begin, I wanted to say this, that every family's story is different. You might be listening while holding circumstances that make these wonderings feel far away, or very close, or impossibly complicated. And that's okay. Please take what resonates, and please leave behind what doesn't. You are the expert on your child and your family's story. Denise, thank you for being here to wonder alongside me. Let's begin. So Denise, I wanted to look at when a child wonders, should I make myself smaller? The question seems to hold so many layers. Sometimes it feels part of learning how to move through the world, that gentle developmental work of learning to read a room. You know, when a child starts to notice maybe Gran's house feels different than their friend's house, or classroom voices are different from playground voices. So it might be noticing the beginnings of adaptability and empathy, but sometimes they're learning something else entirely, that their quiet is called shy, that their way of taking time to join in can be seen as a problem to solve, or that their big feelings might make someone else feel uncomfortable. And slowly they might begin to wonder if who they are is somehow wrong in some way. And I wonder if we could look at the difference between these two. You know, one says, you're wonderful, and sometimes wonderful looks different in different spaces. And the other says, you're too much, please be less. And I find myself thinking about how subtle the difference can be between helping a child learn to tune into others and accidentally teaching them to tune out to parts of themselves. I wonder if we could just wonder about that together.
I think it's really important to think about context here.
Okay.
So children are beginning to learn and understand about the wider world and relationships, and they're beginning to understand their own thoughts and others' thoughts. And this is called mindsight, and it's when we develop the capacity to understand our own minds and what's happening perhaps in someone else's mind, but they're also learning about social rules. Really complicated, trying to get a grasp of the world and ourselves and others. I think they're trying to learn also about what is expected of me in these different contexts. So I think we can be concrete in a way about our noticing with the child that actually it's really hard to figure out what all these rules are and how we fit in with that, or perhaps how we don't. So I think there'll be places where children will want to fit in, and they'll want to feel secure about being part of. So I think, again, it's about kind of moment by moment, just breaking it down to feeling secure about having that conversation with them, to sort of normalise it and take perhaps an example like, it's really hard for you to sit down for so long in that place. I see that. I really see that you're having to try and fit in with what's expected, whilst also you're recognising how your child might feel about that mismatch, that difference between what's expected and how they feel.
I think that's really important. What you're saying is normalise the complexity of this.
Yeah.
Make time and space for the complexity of this, so that a child understands this is complex stuff, because it can be presented as simple. And we spoke before, I was saying about how in early years lesson plans, they highlight certain words. And I suppose as you were speaking, I was hearing words that you were repeating, like complexity, and kind of the need to sit with that and to help a child recognise that this feels difficult and challenging because it is.
Yeah.
That the complexity and challenge doesn't necessarily sit in them; it sits in
the context
of it.
Yes, where they are and what perhaps the social rules are.
That's lovely, and I think the word context is something important. Thinking about our children move through so many different spaces. And obviously, as they grow in age, the number of spaces that they move through is likely to grow too. And many of these spaces simply can't hold all that they are. So just thinking about a classroom that might value quiet, or a friendship group which might prize sameness, or a family dinner that feels too still for a body that needs to move. And how easy it is in these moments to locate the problem in the child. If only they could sit still, if only their feelings weren't so big, or if only they could just calm down. And I suppose I wanted to hold space, Denise, for what if the question isn't about the child at all? What if the question is about the space? You're talking about context and also holding the complexity, our important word here, that we don't oversimplify in this. Finding the right balance between a child's needs and a space's needs is delicate individual work, that we can't really hold in this space. And how compromise is often part of it, but what that compromise looks like will be different for every individual, for every family. But perhaps here we could name the mismatch instead of calling it a flaw. So I've got one family in mind. Their child was being told that they were too loud in class, and the parent shared with the child, the classroom needs quiet right now, and your body's got a lot of energy it wants to express. Both of these things are true. Neither one is wrong. And in that parent's framing of it, they weren't asking the child to be less themselves. They were simply, for the child, opening up that idea that both truths were both were true and they were coexisting. And both, I know, is a word that we return to again and again. So I just wondered, Denise, what can shift when we name the mismatch between the child and environment rather than locating the problem in the child?
Mm-hmm. In family therapy, we have this lovely saying, belief, that the problem is the problem, the person isn't the problem. And that's a great starting place, isn't it? To see, widen out to the context of the situation that's creating these difficulties, these feelings. So, for example, I worked with a family where the daughter was having times where she felt really overwhelmed, and this showed itself at home, and the parents just really didn't understand. They didn't understand what's going on, and the little girl didn't understand what was going on. And at school, she was so bright, so bubbly, very popular. But when she got home, she was sort of really irritable and just sort of didn't feel like herself. So the parents thought, perhaps we'll do extra activities after school, just to help, maybe help with these outbursts. They were trying to sort it out. But when we looked at, what was going on and the effort that she put into being bubbly and popular, she sort of realised, she came to that conclusion that actually what she needed was rest and a place just to take shelter at home. And so she made this big effort to be okay in the context of school.
Right.
What was required of her. And that was a coping strategy. But the effort of doing that didn't really feel like her. There was a big gap between the real her, and what she was having to do to actually cope with school. So, actually understanding that was enough, really, to find out what she needed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So by looking, I was asking about naming the mismatch between the child and the environment, and it feels like what that child went on to discover was there was a mismatch. The amount of energy that they had to offer to one particular environment in order to feel like they were thriving or presenting in a way that they were thriving created a challenge in another environment that they existed in. So there's something in there, repeating messages that we've shared previously about the noticing.
Yeah. She was so exhausted by having to be this person, and in the context of outside, that when she got home, she just let it all go.
And there's big questions in there that we haven't in this space to look at, but, responding to the child's needs and the space's needs, just thinking about that small offering of that story that you've just shared. That's complex, isn't it?
It is. There's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. But that noticing then hopefully offers something going forwards. And, I think back to the girl in the year 6 classroom. For me, she stayed with me because younger me, I would love younger me to have met her and to have seen how someone with a similar story took that story and thrived in it. And, it made me curious about what made her response possible. Was it her relationship with the teacher? Was it her class? Was it her family's celebration of her difference, her own temperament, the cumulative experience of spaces that made room for her? And also holding that, knowing that, none of this is simple. That same girl in a different classroom, maybe with a different teacher on a different day, she might have felt very differently or presented very differently. So perhaps when we notice our children dimming, the question isn't about why are they shrinking, but about what about this particular space at this particular moment is asking them to be smaller. And I suppose I also wonder if you're listening and you recognize this in yourself. If you were the child who learned to make yourself smaller, watching your own child navigate these spaces can feel tender. And sometimes their brightness might stir memories of your own dimming. And this is part of the story that you're holding too. I've been noticing in my work how making yourself smaller can look so different from one child to another. Sometimes I'll sit with a child who's learned to quiet their voice, speaking barely above a whisper, even when they've got so much to say. Or other times I notice a child who maybe used to bubble over with enthusiasm about their interest, but now simply shrugs when they're asked what they love. Sometimes what's being tucked away is harder to name, a way of moving through the world, a particular brightness. Parts of who they are don't seem to fit the shape that the world's offering to them. Every child's version of smaller is uniquely shaped by their world, by the spaces they move through, the messages they've received, what feels safe and what doesn't. So maybe a place to start is simply to wonder, what does my child mean when they say they feel too much? Which space might be giving them that message? What might those spaces be struggling to make room for? And sometimes, Denise, I'm thinking about, for some children, staying small right now is about safety. Shrinking might be wisdom, might be a way of protecting what's tender until the space feels safe enough. I'm thinking about some children, they know that they're doing this. They can name the moments when they hold parts of themselves back, and others might not realize it at all. And I wondered if we could wonder about what difference it can make when a grown-up begins to notice that pattern with them.
Mm-hmm. Listening to you just talk, my mind went to something quite joyous, really, about the Christmas nativity plays, and when they're like 4 or 5 and they come in, and the teacher's really trying to keep them, sort of shepherd them in things, but because of this, where they're in their development, they really, really want to see you, don't they? And wave crazily at you, and maybe shout out mummy, or daddy or something. And that's gorgeous, isn't it? But then, skip a few years on, those children have sort of learned, haven't they, to what's expected of them, to conform. And we can, as parents, we can see their sparkly bits, can't we, as they come in. And they know that they've learnt to hold back, haven't they? And it might be that sort of discreet wave that they do. And it might be, it's wholly inappropriate, we know, for us to do anything other than a little nod or a little smile, because we're conforming too, aren't we? But this can be like this is just an example of actually a child learning to what's expected in the context of them, for them, and the messages that they're given. You should be able to sit down, you should be able to sit still, you should be able to do this, and And these should messages, they grow louder and louder, don't they? Our expectations. And then does that really translate into, yeah, I should, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I am a lot. So I think there's something about exploring that, what is it like, that experience of these shoulds, and perhaps if it feels okay to name it, and really what you're saying is, in that moment where you give your child in the audience a little wink, or there's eye contact, you're saying, I see you, I understand how difficult this is. Perhaps you've had that conversation before they've gone. And I see why you might be getting small here.
I think that's really interesting. There's something about what you've just said that makes me think about how, as a grown-up, the desire to conform and to feel that your child is thriving can sometimes make you align with the shoulds and try and drag your child up to the shoulds. But there's something about what you're saying is what happens when you step down to the child's experience of that. What are they feeling, seeing, noticing? What is their unique experience of the world?
And keeping connected with that, in
Yes.
that knowing, if there's that conversation and that knowing between you, they can feel held in that, that they still are seen, their sparkly, shiny bits are still seen and held by you, whatever the context.
It makes me remember a story from many years ago when a child was told to, that they got into trouble at school and they should have been grateful for the gift at the end of term, which was a packet of crisps from the teacher that the teacher had bought with their own money. And the child didn't like crisps and so gave the crisps back and was sad that they didn't get a gift like the others. And the child was told they should have known to be grateful because the teacher had used their own money, which was like an adult concept.
Yeah.
And if you step down into the child's world, the child didn't experience the joy of the gift alongside their peers, and that felt sad. But you can see the disconnect. The adult story remains true, but so it's the both, isn't it?
It's the both, and recognising how that would feel, how disappointing it would feel, and perhaps unfair.
Yes.
They could have got Smarties or something.
Lovely. Little plug there for Smarties. We'll have a delivery next week, hopefully, Denise. Lovely. Thank you. Yes, and I think what you're talking about is if we can stay connected and find out what's going on for our child, we can begin to get a stronger sense of the shrink, why, and notice. And thank you. In our companion episode of Worry Wizard Wonderings, there's a lovely idea called the kindness mirror, where you leave little notes for your child, or they leave little notes themselves on a mirror and look in and see and say, I'm loved, or I'm enough, or whatever messages feel important. And I've been thinking about how I've seen children light up when kind words are shared with them. When a grown-up has listened to their detailed story, for example, about a favourite game, and reflects back how their excitement has delighted them. Or when a grown-up allows space for a child's big feelings to be big without rushing them away. Or as Toni Morrison would urge, when an adult's eyes light up simply because a child they care about walked into the room. And these are just some moments that can become mirrors, the ones that quietly build a child's sense of worth. And it isn't just in the bright moments. We've also talked about the repair, when you lose your steadiness, but then you return. When you say, that wasn't about you being too much, that was about me being overwhelmed. How children can learn that they're safe even when the world wobbles. And if your child is struggling and you feel reaching out for support might be helpful, then I just wanted to share that whilst our space is here for gentle wonderings, we're not offering instructions or solutions. You know your child in ways that these short episodes never could, but we want to thank you for pausing here with us. Rather than a list of things to do following our time together, which doesn't feel very Chats with the Worry Wizard, I wanted to offer an invitation for noticing. This week, I wondered whether perhaps you could watch for moments when your child seems to dim their light, not to stop it, but just to notice. When does it happen? Around whom? In which spaces? Sometimes simply noticing changes something in us or in them. And then maybe notice one moment, just one, when their brightness feels like a gift. Can you let them see your genuine delight in that moment? Not exaggerated, just real. These small glimmers of being celebrated in their fullness, they can matter more than we realise. Lovely whispers of belonging that we can return to. And if you find it hard to notice those moments this week, that's okay too. Sometimes our own tiredness makes the light harder to see, and that too is part of the story. These chats are just beginnings. If you'd like to explore more, you'll find 2 other Worry Wizard podcasts inside In This Together, A Year with the Worry Wizard. One is Worry Wizard Wonderings, a co-listen for you and your child at bedtime, creating gentle moments of connection. The other is Wondering Together, just for parents, so you feel confident holding what may emerge. Together, they're here to walk alongside you in the everyday ups and downs, the wobbly mornings, the tricky bedtimes, and everything in between. Denise, thank you for wandering alongside me.
You're very welcome.
These conversations, they are not giving us tidy endings, but perhaps that's the point. They're not meant to. I opened today with 2 moments, a child apologising for taking up space and a girl celebrating her difference with joy. I'm left feeling curious about the context they were navigating, wondering about spaces that either made room for that fullness or asked them to shrink. What I hope you might carry from today, when your child dims their light, is that the first question doesn't have to be, what's wrong with the child? It can be, what about this space is struggling to hold them? That shift from child as problem to context as a question feels so important. The wondering beneath this episode is one a child will return to many times. Our children will move through countless spaces and they'll need to navigate again and again. But introducing the idea that shrinking isn't about being too much, it's about being in a space that might be too small. It may be helpful. What if the work isn't dimming them? What if the work is protecting that light as we explore together how they can shine it brightly? I'm sending you well-being wishes from me, Amy, the Worry Wizard.
When you're feeling scared like nobody cares, I hope that you know that I will always be there for you. I'm here for you. And tell me what you're thinking, 'cause I want to know. When your heart is sinking, I'll be there to show with proof. I'm here for you. 'Cause I'll be your friend, an ear I'll lend. I'll tell you time and time again, it's true.